Hello, welcome to our webinar today. For this webinar, and for those of you who have been to previous webinars with Kellerman Consulting, usually we've done them alone. This webinar and the successive ones that we're going to do after this, we are joined by another organization that we're very proud to work with. So before I get started, I wanted to allow Evan Bates, who is with me, to introduce himself.
Thanks so much, Brian. And thank you to Kellerman Consultant for partnering with Mantech on this. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Evan Bates. I am the Sales and Marketing Business Advisor for Mantech. Mantech is a part of the MEP network, which I'll explain a little bit about that in here in a second. But we are a nonprofit resource center for manufacturers within the South Central Pennsylvania region. We help with everything from sales and marketing assistance to robots and automation, through process improvement, and then also workforce engagement. We help with training, projects, anything that a manufacturer would need, we're there to assist, even grants and subsidy assistance. The MEP network is a nationwide system of centers just like Mantech who can assist with everything that I just discussed and even more. There's usually one per state, but there's many other states, including Pennsylvania, that have more than one center. We are here to be a resource. So we ask that any manufacturers, if you guys don't know your MEP center and you'd like to get involved or you'd like to get some information on that, to reach out directly to me. I'd be happy to get you engaged with them to learn about what your center can do for you. And if you are in that South Central Pennsylvania region, please reach out to me. There's tons of things that Mantech can offer, and most of them, if not all of them, are free. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you. And I just want to add to that. Kellerman Consulting works with a broad range of businesses all over the country, and the MEP process is something that many of our clients have utilized. They get grant funding. They are out of those programs and have built themselves up working with MEPs. So we are extraordinarily honored and happy to actually work with MEPs and to get to do some marketing and webinar series with them. So please, if you are not familiar with MEPs, you should look them up in your state. As Evan said, they can be extremely helpful, especially for growing businesses. So for this webinar, to speak towards that growing business and existing business issues, we have hiring, and specifically hiring for food safety and quality assurance roles. This is obviously a very broad topic. We do have some filter on how we're going to look at this today. I wanted to start by saying that there are obviously, at least in the United States now, challenges with hiring, really, and we hear from our clients across the country, the challenges in finding people. We can touch on some of those issues. I mean, they do factor into how do you hire QA and how do you hire food safety people. If you can't find people because we're not getting applicants, that's a little bit above and beyond what we're going to talk about today. However, we will touch a little bit on what that looks like and how to broaden the search a little bit. But what we are going to talk about are the issues with filling specifically QA roles, and that is both in food facilities and non. Like, what are the challenges and problems in getting someone to take on a QA role and in finding people that are going to be a good fit for that role? So with that, we're going to look at, like, what are we looking for in job applicants? So if you are going to hire for QA roles, what are you even looking for as far as the most important skills? Once you get those applicants, how should we interview them? What are we doing in the interview process to sort of weed out the most valuable potential people to fill these roles versus those folks that are interviewing or have applied for those jobs may not, through their work experience or personality, may not be the best fit. And lastly, here, I do want to say we are going to touch on something that's very important to me, what I've learned as someone hiring as a QA manager, but even more importantly, Kellerman Consulting, we hire every year. We've hired many people. We've gone through the hiring process many times, sometimes come up empty, but we have been very successful in hiring some wonderful people that do work for us. And in that, the one thing that I have learned over time is this idea of disqualifying as a huge skill set in the interview process. And some of you I think are going to be a little bit concerned when I tell you what disqualifying is, but I assure you once we talk through it, I think I can explain how really trying to disqualify the applicant is ultimately the best way to find the best applicant. And so we will touch on that as we work through our slides. One thing I quickly want to say, as always, for those of you who have been to our webinars previously, for those of you who are new, if you have any questions specific to what we're talking about, there is a chat bar to the side here. It's this way as I'm looking at it. That chat function, if you enter in a question during the presentation, I will happily answer it. I love to do these as an interactive process. It's my favorite thing about webinars is I can talk to you now. So if you have questions, please do not hesitate to go put them up on the chat function. I will stop and answer them as I go. We will have a Q&A at the end. So even if you are a little shy on doing that now, or you don't think of it until the end, we will have time to get to it then. All right. So with all of that said, what are the main issues we have with QA roles? This is, again, food facilities or non-food facilities. Quality assurance is a unique part of the business. I will tell you now that in my personal experience, for businesses that are manufacturing businesses, whether you're growing or large businesses, really the point at which a business matures to where it's a sustainable business, there's a lot of new orders coming in, the lines are up and running on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Most businesses get to this moment where they realize, oh my goodness, I need a quality assurance person. And at that point, who is going to fill that role is often the person in the office or the person in the back who refuses to say no to it, or who basically seems like they're willing to take a clipboard or something and go walk around, or a tablet now, and wander around and actually kind of like do QA type stuff. And so and that is actually how I got into it. And many people I know, there are actually not so many people who have a background in quality assurance, like went to school for it or learned, interned or something as QA. Most of the time people fall into it by accident. So it can be really challenging to even identify, like, how do I even attract someone who is a QA professional, or how do I raise someone up? And I will say that in a future webinar, we're going to get to raising folks up from a facility to do QA work. That's going to be an entire webinar. It would be too long to do that now. But to go along with this idea of, like, it's kind of hard to find people to do it, and businesses that get to that level have a hard time finding people. One of the biggest challenges is obviously quality assurance sets a very high floor of knowledge base, even for someone who is just, even if you're willing to go out there and just find a person who is an honorable and honest and decent person to do it, there has to be some basic understanding of math and science. And that obviously scares away a lot of people. I mean, for the most part, I used to be a high school science teacher before I was a QA manager. And so when I came in to do QA, I knew chemistry enough to go out there and do it. That helps a lot. But it is a huge challenge to go out and find someone that either knows math and science enough to apply it in a technical field, like in a manufacturing facility, but also someone who then has other skills to go out and walk floors, interact with people, be personable. Those are challenges. And then, of course, one big issue, and this is an industry-wide, this is beyond this industry, but it's really a national issue, which is quality assurance. Finding good people often requires that we pay. And we offer good wages for those people because it is technically sophisticated. And in a very cynical way, you will often hear in factories, quality assurance doesn't make us any money, right? That's what a lot of times ownership and C-level people will tell you is, quality assurance is just a cost. And so there's a real reluctancy to want to really pay for a high-level technical job because it is considered to be a loss. Whereas if we don't pay, you have a hard time. It's difficult to attract the types of people that would actually be willing to take on the responsibilities of QA. I do want to say, obviously, for anyone, whether it be in central Pennsylvania, in the Mantech web, or any other companies throughout the country, in rural locations, the challenge is to find a QA person. Some colleges and universities are located in rural areas, and sometimes, if you're lucky, people will come out of those universities and want to stay near those areas. But in rural communities, it is often an enormous challenge to find anybody to fill jobs, let alone someone in a technically sophisticated QA job. So with that said, what are we looking for in a job applicant? Who do we want? And what are the things that may come up that are concerning for us? And I do want to say here that, again, Kellerman Consulting as a entity, we end up talking, and every time we put a job post up, we get hundreds of QA people. And I do want to speak to our process only because I think it is so important as a distillation of what does it look like when 150 or 500 QA people all apply for a job at the same time, let alone people outside of the industry. Again, if you are in a factory and you go post for a job, you post a job for your facility, if you get 5 or 10 or 20 people sending in resumes, right there, you now have to sort through and look at who are these people, and how do I determine which person seems like they're going to be a good QA person and who is not. And obviously, most people will just go with someone who used to be a QA manager. So if I'm hiring a QA manager, I want someone who was a QA manager. If I am looking for a QA tech, somebody who says, oh, I used to be a technician in a lab, or I was a QA tech in a facility. And sorting that out can be quite difficult. I will tell you that if I was advising someone in a factory what to look for, I would really like to see someone with a math or science background, if possible, or someone with really good writing skills, someone even who has any sort of background writing things, used to work for a newspaper, maybe worked in a legal office. Those skills are actually really, really important for doing QA work. And when I joke to people about what I do for my career, even though I focus on an expertise in food safety and quality management systems, I really am just a writer. I mean, I spend so much time writing documents and banging them out that I feel much closer to being an author, like a novelist or a nonfiction writer, than I do somebody who actually is like a lab chemist or something like that. And in a factory, in a business that has quality assurance, because of the need to write standard operating procedures and policies, and obviously if you are going to pursue things like certification schemes, somebody who's not afraid to go sit down and write is incredibly valuable. And somebody who is a writer with some research experience, you can Google how to write any of these programs. And so, yes, it is ideal for us to find someone who has that previous experience. But again, based on what we see when we post for Kellerman Consulting and we are doing our interview process, that's a pretty small pool of people. Even though there are lots of factories in America, QA managers, ones that are very good, are often very well compensated in the jobs that they have and are not necessarily going out there and looking. So finding people and being creative in those skills, again, good writing skills, maybe some math and science background, will go a very long way. For red flags, and this is really important for us, and I will say right away, and I feel very bad about this every time that we post a new position for our company, and I'm sure that any of you who have posted job postings for your jobs probably have seen this. The first few people who apply that's immediately a red flag. If I post a job today, the people who apply for that job today, the same day that I have posted the job, are almost assuredly people who have been looking for work. And if they apply same day, are probably posting for any job that is newly posted every day. And when we think about that from the standpoint of the odds of that perfect person logging on to the internet, seeing your job post and applying for it the same day. Now, there is always a chance that the perfect person happens to look today and want to post for your job. However, in our experience, that is not the case. The people who apply even the first couple days are out there applying for everything, and it usually is pretty obvious because most of those people don't have necessarily the experience or don't even look carefully at what the job posting is. They're just out there trying to find a job. I say I feel bad about it because I'm very sympathetic to anybody looking for a job. Obviously, it's a very stressful and challenging thing in life, and I can think back years ago to needing a job, and it's like once you start to go through that process, it can be very grueling and tiresome, and people don't respond, so you just end up applying for job after job after job. So that first rush of people is oftentimes, if you're looking for a QA person, expect to post a job and expect to take multiple weeks to find an applicant, someone who applies that is going to be a good fit. The first rush of people, yes, please look through those and do so carefully because you may find someone who is good. However, the expectation should be, I got to keep this post up for a month or 2 months or 3 months because I need somebody who's going to be a great fit. And that person, if they're a great fit, I would hope is really good at keeping a job. And so that person, the circumstance by which someone's going to show up, look at your job post and apply to it, it's going to be on their schedule, not on yours. And so it should take a little while. And in our experience, we keep job posts up sometimes 90 to 120 days, and it may take that long for a person to show up. I do want to quickly say when that right person shows up, and I think hopefully those of you folks who have had this experience in a manufacturing setting, know if you can get a great hire, those people are worth an incredible amount to the business. And it is worth being careful and waiting a little bit and not just throwing out a job post and just accepting the first person that you think is going to not quit on you and allow you to move on to the next thing. Spending that extra time and finding that person it can be incredibly valuable for the business. Last thing I'm going to say is inspections, auditing, regulatory, and certification. So people who have been through audits, that might be someone who was an accountant, that can be people in the legal profession, somebody who has those experiences, at least in inspection and auditing. That is absolutely something that you can consider. Health inspectors for people in food factories, someone who has been a health inspector, don't dismiss them. There are people who go into facilities and have worked through interviewing and questioning people, and those skills transfer really, really well into food factories or even just regular QA for non-foods, for any sort of industrial. So please keep that in mind. Okay, so here we want to get into, and I want to break things down over the next couple of slides. What type of work history, we'll continue on with that, but what kind of person? Because ultimately with QA, I'm going to tell you that unlike an operator on the floor, someone that just goes and manages equipment or performs maintenance tasks or manages shipping, receiving, those types of people, you can get a wide range of personalities. You don't need someone who's going to be the most talkative. Somebody who just does their job and does it well is probably going to be enough. QA is its own special part of the business because whether it be a food safety person that has real food safety critical responsibilities to keep people alive, or just in an industrial setting where you are checking quality, people need to both be very careful in what they do, but also have some personable skills here, right? QA people, for those of you who have been in factories with a QA person with a difficult attitude, it's pretty much like when you were a kid in school and having a bad teacher, a teacher who might have been a really good teacher but had a bad attitude, you're going to ruin the whole thing. So as we dig into that, dial through these things, dig into it, we want to look at first what are these skills that we really need here We talked in the previous slide about things like have been through an audit or maybe have QA experience. But really, specifically with QA, I want to point out that a QA person should be able to perform the task for which they are a supervisor. And I can imagine in my mind any QA person listening to this running away as fast as they can from this message. But I'm sorry, a QA person should be able to put on the PPE or any of the uniforms that the other workers have and get to work on that line. And that's crucial. And frankly, I did this when I first started in QA, and I would recommend it to anyone. It can be a challenge for QA. You're not allowed to check your own work. So how you jump on the line, how you fill in for a shift has to be done with some care, because you can have some basic violations to the principles of quality assurance. But get your QA person on the line. Let them do the job for a couple hours at least, and so they can understand what it feels like to do that job. Because when I'm trying to make sure that the operations, whether it is manually doing the work or overseeing automation that does the work, an operator and a quality assurance person really have a lot of overlap, and a QA person that can do the work and is willing to do the work is somebody that's going to have some ability to sympathize and empathize with the workers. And I cannot tell you that I how much I think that is a crucial link between QA and operations, that the operations folks feel that QA is one of them. We also want someone that, if it's a food facility, that can actually rewrite the HACCP plan or the preventive controls plan. And that is unfortunately a small subset of QA people actually can sit down in the book and rewrite it. So if you're thinking about who you're going to be interviewing, are you willing to jump on the line? Would be a great question. Could you rewrite my HACCP plan or preventive controls plan? For any of you that are from non-food facilities, could you write an SOP? Do you know how to do that? Would you be willing to try? Would you be willing to rewrite some of our policies and write training materials? Those are really crucial. If you can find someone who can do those things, they are going to be very valuable from a QA standpoint. You can ask, does the person know the difference between a correction and a corrective action? We don't have time to go through that in this webinar. We've done several webinars, and we have some videos on our website if you really need a refresher on the difference between a correction and corrective action. If you, as a person listening to me, don't know the answer, that's okay. If you're hiring someone who's a QA person, they should know the answer to that. And if they don't, then that person probably is going to need a lot of guidance, and they're going to need to do a lot of training as they start in the business. And those are crucial. The preventive actions. Now, a good QA person should be able to tell you every single preventive action that has been put in place since they started. And for those of you who have a background in QA, I'm hoping that you're running through in your mind right now, traumatically, all of the preventive actions that had to be put into place because something bad happened and you had to deal with it, and you created a new form or had to retrain people or had to put in a new piece of equipment. Those things are obvious. And a QA person that works for you should be somebody, or works in your organization, should be somebody who can rattle those off essentially by memory. And, for anyone who's been a QA tech or QA manager, writing up non-conformances and writing up all the stuff, the bad stuff that happens, especially in an operation that may yield a bunch of errors as part of an acceptable program, they do blend together. But where I actually have to bring a preventive action into it, it should be memorable at a minimum. And if I'm interviewing someone, one of the questions I want to ask is like, what are the preventive actions that you yourself created or had to oversee? And someone who says, I don't know that I ever had to do any preventive actions, they probably were not hands-on in QA. And we're going to come back to that as far as in some later slides in regards to what are the bad stuff you've been through. And so we'll get there. But what's the bad stuff you've been through is something that is really crucial when you're trying to figure out whether someone has good QA experience. This last little slide, the last little point I have here on the slide, knowing every employee by name. And this speaks to what I was saying, the knows every employee. Now, it is, if you have a factory of 300 people, that is not necessarily a realistic skill, but the personable part of this, so the skills here, it speaks to the same kind of thing of jumping on the line, right? So if I can go around and I can say hello to all the operators and I know who they are and I've talked to them, that is crucial to building trust in QA. When I see QA people that I feel like are not behaving well and representing a business well, and again, this is both for food safety and quality, people who generally feel that they are separate from production don't even bother to learn the employees' names on the line. And again, those people, if I'm interviewing and I get the sense that someone has a personality that isn't friendly enough to go around and at least build some trust with the other workers, I feel like that QA person is going to let the company down one way or the other. And with that, let us shift from not just the skills we're looking for, but what type of person are we looking for? Who are we looking for? Because again, as those job applications come in, I do recommend to the folks that are listening to this, it is important to look at work history. It's important to look at what people identify as their skills, but you must interview and you must talk to people. And so you should also, separate of that, be looking for a person, a personality that you think is going to fit inside that business. Because again, a good QA person, just like any good hire, is so valuable for the business. A great hire in a company, the people that we have hired in Kellerman Consulting, and there's a picture of our team here, I can look at those people and they are the company. And every single person that we have brought in that has been successful working with us, from day one, I wake up every day and I just can't believe how lucky I was to have these great people who, when I go and interact with them, I feel that they're pushing things forward. And any factory, any whether it's manufacturing or food or industrial, a great worker pushes things so much farther. Having the right personality is often a truly essential part of that. So what you must have with a QA person, they must be trustworthy. Now, sometimes you have businesses that are acting in untrustworthy ways or doing things they shouldn't be doing. If ownership is pushing those things, that's a whole separate issue. And of course, the major examples where QA people have gotten in trouble, it is usually because they are, quote unquote, following orders, or the owner told them to do something and they didn't say no. Separate of those things, in general, I really need my QA person to be trustworthy. I need to know that those folks are not hiding in their office all day, that they actually are reviewing records and reviewing other people's work to make sure it's being done correctly. And for the people listening, it is very possible that you have worked with someone as a QA technician or a QA manager that wasn't great at it, and most of the time they hide. And I would put that in my bucket of trustworthiness, and not having that is a killer. Beyond that, and this is really where I think about folks going into the back on the line, we need people who are direct, assertive, and cautious or careful in what they're doing. So being able to go to the line needs to be stopped if there's a quality problem or if there's a food safety problem. And I need someone who is not going to be is not going to wait or is not going to hesitate to do those things. I need someone who knows if they see a problem, they're going to be direct. To go back to, I need to know everyone by name as a QA tech, that level of trust, not having someone over your shoulder just saying, stop the line, you're doing something wrong. But rather having someone who, when they go to say, hey, wait a minute, we need to stop here. I see something. We need to stop and wait and investigate what this is. If it's someone who's built trust, who knows the names of their colleagues, it's a lot easier for those things to happen without there being long-term ramifications. What is nice to have is calm, someone who doesn't get worked up. QA people, you're dealing, it's very stressful. QA work can be, especially when errors occur or where there's problems with products. A QA manager who stays calm is one that's going to keep everyone else calm. And folks that are on the line and they're able to observe issues, again, be directive and be assertive, but remain calm and not start yelling or not raise their voice on instinct is very, very valuable. The parts of creativity, that's something that I do want to speak to who usually is attracted to QA work. We generally get very conservative people, folks that are very cautious, so that careful and cautiousness, I would say, is almost a guarantee for someone who seeks out QA work. But someone who is also creative, creativity in any creative endeavor, whether it's art or music, whether it's writing, being creative is taking a risk. And it does require that you go beyond your comfort level. And what I have seen as a consultant, what I saw as a QA manager, what I saw as a teacher before that, folks want people who are very cautious, just want to give you the right answer and move on. Somebody who has the elements of carefulness or caution, but also can create and be creative, that can push a company's QA program forward in crucial ways, right? Not just someone who says, well, I want to take the documents that are already here and make sure they're right. Someone who can actually go in and say, I'm going to change these documents to better represent our company. That's taking a risk and being creative. Lastly, someone who's outgoing and considerate, again, that personable, getting back to that, going out, being able to talk to people and being able to relate to them is really important as to who am I looking for a QA role. And again, food factory or industrial, it makes no difference. So with that said, I want to shift us towards this idea of how to interview. We're going to touch on this disqualifying thing quickly through this process. But how do I actually do a job interview here for QA? And here I want to quickly make a plug. And that plug is for being methodical in this process. Many businesses complain about how they can't find any good people and they can't hire easily. But oftentimes in talking to folks, what comes out is there isn't a lot of willpower to actually do it. If you're going to put a job post up, you're going to be inundated with resumes. You need to be able to go through those resumes carefully. You need to schedule and organize through those resumes and actually follow through and schedule those interviews, conduct them. And then you need to furthermore, have a organized process to select who we think the best person is. That's difficult enough. Even if you do all of those things right, it is difficult. And we're going to talk to that. But please make sure if you work for a business that is in the hiring process that we have identified that people are actually going out there and using willpower to work through all of those steps. Because we can complain about and talk about hiring all we want, but if we don't have a system in place, the best person, the person you need to work for you, isn't going to bang on the door and demand a job. You have to really work hard. It takes many, many hours to hire. At Kellerman Consulting, I just want to say we have a leadership team of 4 people. We have 2 of those people review every resume that comes in. And so only 2 people, and those people have those roles. They get then passed on. They go through another section of review, then an interview, and then a follow-up interview after that. So of the 4 people, each person has a role, and it takes us months to go through that. And it is extremely methodical. Even when we do it, we're not always successful. But to see it done with organization and how many steps it takes to actually find that person, to listen to someone say, well, I put up a LinkedIn post and I didn't get anybody, so I gave up. Anyone doing that is not doing a good job trying to find good people. Even I don't care how hard it is these days. When we are interviewing, we need to research what those people have put on their resumes, on their work histories. And we need to think through when we're going to do an interview, you need to have a question per job to try to determine whether or not those people are being accurate in what they're expressing about those jobs. And we need to try to determine, do those skills, did the things that they did at those jobs actually matter to us? So I know when I am trying to interview, I come up with between 5 and 10 questions, and I go through the resume and I try to come up with 1 to 2 questions per job. What did you do here? What at this job you said that you were responsible for all corrective actions. So let's talk about 2 corrective actions. Tell me about them and what you did and how you felt about it. I will tell you now, job interviews usually can be over in about 2 to 3 minutes. If you have the right questions and someone is not prepared to answer them, you can disqualify very quickly and disqualify to say, hey, this person's not gonna be a good fit. To go along with that, and again, we're going to lead up to this disqualifying piece. Ask them and tell them the worst parts of your job. And this is something that is often very counterintuitive when we're trying to find people, especially if we're desperate for a good employee to hire. We want to sell our business. We want to talk about how great we are. But in doing that, we often miss some of those red flags that we spoke about previously, and we miss the fact that we might be talking to someone who's not a great fit for the business. And I was very guilty of this earlier in my career. I always wanted to talk about how great the job was or what we were going to do together and all of this, when I really should have been saying, this is the worst part of the job. Are you sure that you're okay with this? Because, for Kellerman Consulting, we're technical writers, and not everyone likes to write. And so I always start with, you're going to do a lot of really boring writing. Are you okay with that? And if somebody is being honest and they don't want to do it, we can be done quickly. We can save ourselves time. And I don't have to find out that they don't really like to do the job 6 months later. And now we got to figure out if that person has to go, or how we're going to fix, how we're going to adjust the job to what they actually want to do. So presenting, if it's really cold in the back, if you have to wear a jacket, you start with, are you sure you want to work in a freezer? Are you sure you want to work in the hot heat, in the humidity in the summer? Start with those. If you have to carry heavy, if it's going to be carrying heavy objects or driving around vehicles that can be difficult, lead with that. Start with those things and get a person to talk about how they feel about the worst parts of your job. If they say they don't mind and they've done that before, awesome. That's great. And to go along with that, discuss the technical specifics, the things that have to be done at your job. You need to ask someone, do you know how to run specialty equipment? And get into it. If they say they've run that equipment, ask them a couple questions about the technical specifics of that equipment. It doesn't need to be gotcha questions. You need to try to make them generalized to fit what is reasonable for someone to know, right? We have to train people when they come in the door. So the fact that they may not understand how to run a HPLC lab equipment, or they've never run a moisture analyzer, or at least haven't run the one you have, that should not be necessarily a disqualifier. We should be able to train them. However, if they say they've run a moisture analyzer, we should be able to come up with a couple of general questions of, what was your experience running a moisture analyzer, or at least a like piece of equipment, and get them talking about those technical specifics. Last thing I'm going to say, and I can't get into too much, we don't have enough time for me to tell my horror stories, but I will say one horrible mistake that I would redo in my career. I hired someone from a temp agency, so I thought that I was safe allowing the temp agency to select someone and send it to us. And it wasn't until after something came up about their past that had been hidden and did not come through the job screens, was not Googling someone. And when we say we should Google someone, a basic, whatever shows up on the first page should tell us if we have an issue or not. And we do not want to be intrusive into somebody's previous history. But I can tell you that if there's something major and you Google their name and where they're from, if something bad is going to pop up, you will save yourself a tremendous amount of heartache. And so I do recommend for people that are hiring, do a quick Google search. Please also do, if you do screens, criminal histories and things like that, if you use a third party, definitely also do that. But if you have someone you feel good about it, Googling them is a good thing. Now, I will tell you, or Facebook, LinkedIn, Facebook, I was 10 years ago, LinkedIn, TikTok videos, whatever it is, go do a quick social media search and make sure that that person hasn't been putting things out into the world in a public way that's going to be embarrassing. And that stuff would come up pretty quickly. Okay, so here is this word to the wise or something, the way that I really feel that job interviews should go. We've touched on this, but I want to be very specific in the last few minutes to talk about the concept of disqualifying. And this is something that we have slowly worked on over time. And I would say I am adamant that the job interviewing process, both from the companies that interview, but also the people that are applying for the job, we go about it backwards. We're doing it wrong. And again, I mentioned a few minutes ago the notion of trying to sell. So the idea of I'm going to sell myself to someone who's interviewing me, or I'm a hiring business factory or a similar business, a consulting business for us. I'm going to try to sell this business because I want to make it sound great for the person who's applying. And in my personal experience, and I'm pretty adamant about this, is that so much is missed when we are trying to sell. Because selling without disqualifying is ultimately not really listening or manicuring the message in such a way that we may get the job or I may hire the person under pretenses that I are not necessarily dishonest, but may be skewed. When we're trying to sell the benefits of the business that they're going to work for, and we spend our entire job interview process talking about benefits and what's great about our business, how excited we are as a company, what we're going to achieve, new products that we're going to put out. Those things are all great. And it's important, and we need to be proud of our company. But if we spend 30 minutes of a 60-minute job interview cheerleading, that's a lot of wasted time to try to figure out, should we shut this interview off? Am I even talking to the right person? And again, I want to go back to the idea of, if we are successful at the point of putting a job post up, if we actually get people responding to that, and we actually have good applicants who are responding, or even if it's local, if it's in a local network. So if a central Pennsylvania business is out there trying to attract someone from that community, you may go and talk to people that you already know and go out there and put job posts up. In any combination thereof, the people that we actually have access to, the population of people who apply or are willing to talk to us about working for us, sitting down with them and starting with the worst parts of the job, the biggest concerns. And again, these are things we talked about, but I want to focus this. When I'm conducting a job interview, what I'm looking for are, what are the things that I am most concerned about? And we should start there. I am worried about your job history. I'm worried about this job that you had. I'm worried about the way that you wrote your resume. Now, if we're having a job interview, that means that potentially you're going to give them the job. So we don't have to be mean about it. But starting with those things and focusing on them and saying, honestly, I have concerns here, and this is what I'm concerned with for the company that we have. This is what I'm concerned with you coming into this company. Starting there gives someone an opportunity to both recognize those, think it through, and the worst case scenario is that the person being interviewed says, you're right, I don't like those things, and I don't think I would like working for your company. If that happens, congratulations, you just saved yourself months of problems, maybe years of problems, potential lawsuits, all kinds of morale issues within the business. Disqualifying finding out that someone isn't going to fit, doing it right up front is an incredibly productive and good outcome. And the best case scenario is they tell you, I hear your concerns, but let me tell you that this is why you are incorrect about those concerns. And when you think about the job applicant and you suggest, these are my concerns with you, and that person comes back with, no, you're wrong. Conversely, job applicants, and I tell anyone that I know that's trying to get a job, like, you should tell this business, a job applicant should have lots of questions. And I guess I probably should have, while that's front of mind, any job applicant that's asking lots of questions, that is a tremendously good thing. And anyone who comes in with a bunch of questions should be somebody that gets a second interview, regardless of whether their talents and skills are perfect. But if that job applicant asks questions and is asking about the things that they're concerned with and brings those up early, you may find that their concerns are unfounded, or that you can work with them to overcome that. Now, if we've done that, if we have gone through a disqualification process and we've overcome it, now we probably have someone that's going to be an incredible fit for our business. Cheryl has a question, which is, do you have a quality assurance inspector job description as an example? I do, I believe, but Cheryl, we will absolutely happily follow up with you on that. And anyone else that wants that, absolutely. We have our job posts, and I'm sure Phoebe has responded. She's actually the person who's really the point person on that. So I will defer to Phoebe, but yes, I'm sure that we can provide that. To finalize this thought process on disqualification, putting in that work and saying and being honest with people and saying, hey, these are the concerns. If we get past that, I think that you have a much better chance of actually finding someone who may be a lasting solution to your business. Getting someone to come in and say, this is what's great about me, I'm so awesome. Ultimately, everybody wants to put themselves in the best light, and you may miss something that was obvious early in the process, and again, would save a lot of heartache and a lot of hassle. So we are going to do our Q&A bit in just 1 second, but before we bring Evan back up, I do want to throw a plug here. This is actually the first of a series of webinars that we're going to do into next year. And so this piece of what kind of people apply for jobs and how do we do job interviews, when it was suggested by Mantech that some folks in Pennsylvania were interested in the hiring process, we realized how sprawling that is. So we broke it up into multiple webinars. And so we are going to, in January, February, and March of next year, continue on with this event and focus on varying aspects of the training process, how to raise people up and how to retain them, and the sort of job definitions in more detail for food safety and quality assurance. So please be aware that we will be posting those about a month before. So I think the ad for the next one will show up soon, but we're going to continue on in the hopes that we can continue to sort of help you think through what all of the various aspects of job retention are in this industry. So with that, we have about 12 minutes left. We do have a bit of time in case anyone has some follow-up questions or wants to interact with us before we wrap this thing up. You will see in the meantime our contact information if you have anything after this webinar. All right, well, no one's putting anything up yet. We'll give it another minute or so. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of awkward. We're just staring at a screen for 10 minutes. We want to avoid that. We do have a comment. Oh, thank you for great information. Appreciate that. I hope that this stuff was helpful. And like I say, this is very, very near and dear to my heart. Hiring, finding good people is an enormous challenge. It's very hard to know what to do. So I really appreciate that comment. Eric's got a question. Perfect. Is as far as skills go, are there any supporting skills such as data analysis or something in that vein that supports a QA role? Well, absolutely. When we think about the actual functions of quality assurance, and the only reason why we didn't get into the specifics of data analysis, for example, or the specifics of running tests, is that each operation, and I'm going to let Evan speak to this in some of his experience with facilities that the MEPs have worked with. But I will quickly say, when you get into the specific, like the ancillary skills, someone who knows how to do a data plot or a trend analysis, yes, those things are fantastic. For a QA person, I would say, again, someone who has conducted a audit and can detail, I know how to ask questions to get people to show documentation and perform an audit. Those are really important supporting skills. And I would say it would be like job specific. So if I have someone in the food industry, their knowledge of critical control points, their knowledge of monitoring steps, verification and validation, those are supporting skills that I would say are very valuable. Soft skills, again, like we talked about, attention to detail would be something that would be extremely valuable. Someone who's sloppy is not great. Evan, did you have anything else that you or any experiences on that?
No, I was just going to add in, well, you actually said exactly that make sure it's industry related experience, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody worked in food on the resume, then that makes sense, right? If somebody's working in a random manufacturing facility, make sure you're checking what industry they're coming from and where you're going to be applying them to. So is there any questions about the MEP system at all? Has anybody worked with their local MEP before? You guys probably can't see the responses, but
yeah, nothing there as well.
Again, if anybody has any questions on the MEPs or, if they're located in the South Central Pennsylvania region, I'd love to be able to connect with you and give you some resources. Even if you're not in the area, still love to connect with you so that way I can share the local resource to you. So please do contact me.
Awesome. I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for listening to what we had to say today. As always, our contact information is below. And as Evan said, if you're in the Pennsylvania area and you would like some MEP help, please do contact him. If you're outside of that area, can't recommend it enough to contact MEPs local to you and see if they have resources that are valuable. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.